Okay, welcome back to ABA exam review in our latest RBT practice exam. We're going through the next questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our famous combo pack. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Question 1. After the first week of class, half of the students stop attending. The teacher removes the assignment that was worth bonus points on the syllabus as a result. The teacher is attempting what if he wants the students to stop skipping class? A couple key points here. First, we need to be sure we know what the teacher is trying to accomplish. The teacher wants these students to stop skipping class. He wants to decrease something. And it's very important because if the teacher wanted to make the students come to class more, he'd be trying to increase the behavior. The fact that the question specifies he wants them to stop skipping class, meaning decrease behavior, is very, very important. Second, we know the teacher removed the assignment. So if he removed the assignment, is it positive or negative? It's going to be negative. And then we know he wants to decrease the behavior. So is that reinforcement or punishment? Well, it's going to be punishment. So removal negative, decrease punishment. We know it's going to be negative punishment. And this question becomes very simple once you start breaking it down that way. You're identifying, am I increasing or decreasing behavior? And then am I adding or taking something away? If you ask yourself those two questions, you should never miss a reinforcement punishment question. Again, we are decreasing, we're taking away. So it's punishing through a negative procedure, negative punishment. Colonel Sanders says yes, sir, and yes, ma'am to his elders, but says what's up to his friends and peers. Colonel Sanders is doing what? Now, let's think about this. Colonel Sanders sees his elders. He says yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. He then sees friends and peers. He says, what's up? So first, to be able to use different responses between these two stimuli, elders and peers, he needs to be able to discriminate, right? He needs to be able to discriminate between stimuli. That's part of the reason we do discrimination training. Because if Colonel Sanders treated his friends like his elders, like his teachers, like firefighters, it just doesn't really work in a socially valid way. You have to be able to discriminate between these different stimuli, and that's what Colonel Sanders is doing. On top of that, he's engaging in different responses. So not only is he discriminating between stimuli, but he's differentiating between responses. So A, differentiating or response differentiation, Colonel Sanders is doing that. We've got multiple responses coming at different times. B, discriminating, stimulus discrimination. He's also doing that. He's discriminating between elders and friends and peers, and then differentiating his responses. So he's really doing both. He's engaging in differentiating, response differentiation, and discriminating, stimulus discrimination. Tacting is a verbal operant, which just means labeling. Colonel Sanders is not labeling anything. He's simply greeting elders and friends and peers differently because he's discriminating between the stimuli and differentiating between the responses. You start a new job as a behavior technician and are assigned a supervisor. At first, you like the way the supervisor trains you. However, the supervisor starts asking you to run errands for them and buy them coffee. The supervisor always makes it seem like a requirement. Is this ethical? Now, as a technician, you're a lot of times in a position where somebody has authority over you, right? If you have a supervisor, just by the nature of responsibility, they have authority over you. But in the model of ABA, we're all on the same team. As a technician, you have a voice. You need to be respected. So you can't let yourself be taken advantage of or pushed around or abused in any way just because they're your supervisor. So in this case, you initially liked how they trained you, but now they want you to run errands and buy them coffee. Now, that is not in your job description, right? As a behavior technician, you're implementing programs, you're assisting in data collection and assessments. It's not your job to run errands and get coffee for your supervisor. That was a big difference between picking up coffee on the way to session for your supervisor as a kind gesture. But if they are asking you on your own time, or even worse, on the clock, to run errands and buy them coffee, that's a problem. So is this ethical? A, yes, as long as the supervisor is your boss. Well, that doesn't make any difference. That makes it worse. They can't abuse their position of authority. B, there is not enough information to determine if this is ethical. There is enough information to determine, and it's not, right? C, no, your supervisor should not put you in this position. Yes, your supervisor should not put you in a position of abusing their authority and making you do things that aren't part of your job description. Running errands and buying them coffee is not your work unless you choose to do those things. It's a different story. But if they're asking you to do these things, they shouldn't be even asking you, right? Just by asking you, they're putting you in a very uncomfortable situation. And then D, no, you cannot buy things for your supervisor. Sure, you can, but it needs to be under your own volition and your choice. So is this ethical? No, your supervisor should not put you in this position. If you are tasked with designing a discrete trial training program and a token economy for a client who will be learning brand new skills that they've never been taught before, what reinforcement schedule would you recommend? A lot of word, long sentence, but let's just break it down. It becomes fairly straightforward. The question wants to know, what reinforcement schedule are you going to recommend? And as an RBT, you're dealing with basic reinforcement schedules, interval schedules, ratio schedules, fixed and variable. Now, we know you're just designing some DTT, right, in a token economy, and the client is learning a brand new skill that they've never been taught before. So a brand new skill. We need to teach it, we need to strengthen it, and we need to reinforce it a lot. When you're teaching new skills, you will typically be reinforcing it quite a bit because you're trying to strengthen the skill that they don't have. So if you're going to start at the very, very beginning of a skill, what reinforcement schedule do you recommend? A CRF. Now, what does CRF stand for? It stands for Continuous Reinforcement Schedule. And the only CRF schedule is an FR1 because the CRF says every single correct response receives reinforcement. And that's where you're going to start. If this is the only information you have and you know it's a brand new skill, it's never been taught before, you should start at a CRF. VR1, FR2, and FI1 are all very thick schedules, right? Meaning they will provide quite a bit of reinforcement, but CRF will ultimately still provide more reinforcement than any of these. A variable schedule is going to be an average, right? So they're not always even going to get reinforcement for their second or third or even fourth response. Fixed ratio 2 is one above CRF, but still requires additional responses. And then an FI1 could be 1 second, 1 minute, but it still requires time plus a response. So if you're learning brand new skills, they've never been taught, and you have no other information, you're going to recommend a continuous reinforcement schedule or an FR1. Robert, a behavior technician, works in the home of one of his clients. Recently, his client's brother has started inviting friends over after school. The brother and his friends are typically loud and intrusive while session is occurring. What is the best course of action for Robert to take? This can be challenging if you're working in a home setting. You've got to work within the confines of the environment because it is the natural environment, but you also need to be able to do your job, right? So in this case, Robert, he's working in the home, and the client's brother is inviting his friends over to school, and they're loud and intrusive while session is occurring, making it difficult for Robert to do his job, right? They're intrusive, they're making a lot of noise. What should Robert do? If you're Robert, if you're a behavior technician in this situation, what's your course of action? A, demand that the brother stops disturbing session. It's not your place to tell the brother what to do. It's not your client. He's not a client of the company. You can't tell the brother what to do, right? Especially right off the bat, okay? Now, later on, if you've had discussions and whatnot, maybe, but right off the bat, no. B, sit the parents of the client down and explain the situation to them. Again, not your job, right? This is not your job to have this conversation with the parents. C, contact his supervisor immediately and let them know the situation. Yes, you've got to contact the client supervisor immediately and let them know the situation. From there, your supervisor might tell you, okay, I will handle it. They might tell you, okay, tell the parents. Either way, you've done what you're supposed to do, which is openly and promptly communicate with the supervisor. And then D, refuse to work until the situation is resolved. No, you just have to figure it out. We all have phones. We all have texting now. There's a way to get in touch with your supervisor pretty quickly, right? So do your best until you get back or until you hear back from your supervisor on what to do with the situation. Isn't your place to tell the brother what to do? Isn't your place to sit the parents down and explain what is going on? Contact the supervisor, go from there. You're reading about the weather for the weekend. The report says that temperatures will be in the 70s, it will be sunny with no rainfall, and that there may be strong wind gusts. What is being described relative to the wind? All right. Question is asking about the wind, right? The description of the wind. So the report saying temperatures will be in the 70s is irrelevant. Sunny with no rainfall is irrelevant. We're worried about the wind. And a big mistake people make is they gloss over the fact that the question usually tells you what you need to look at. And we need to look at the wind. So the weather report says it will be strong wind gust. So what is being described? A, function. Are we describing why the wind is occurring or the purpose? No, we're not. B, topography. Are we describing how the wind will look? No. Are we describing C, the magnitude? Yes, the magnitude is the intensity, it's the strength, it's the size, big, tall, strong, weak, big, small, short. All these things describe magnitude or intensity. So if the weather is telling you there's going to be strong wind gust, it's describing the magnitude of the wind. And then frequency, we're not counting how often the wind gusts, we're not counting anything. Simply describing the magnitude of the wind gust. There is a phenomenon that is well researched in education that occurs when children go on summer break. It is reported that children are unable to do a percentage of what they learned the previous year once they come back from summer break. The issue is most likely related to what? And it's related to a very specific term. This is one of those term questions described as an application question. The phenomenon occurs that children go to summer break. When they come back, they can't do what they previously could. All right. So what has happened? We taught a skill. We stopped teaching the skill. And then the learner loses the skill. Happens all the time. What is that issue? What's the problem here? Well, A, maintenance looks pretty good. Maintenance occurs. If maintenance is successful, then the skill persists or continues once teaching stops. If there is no maintenance, then what is occurring in this situation here happens, right? Teaching stops, and then the skill goes away. B, generalization. Well, they're coming back to the same place. They're not necessarily having a generalization issue. They can't even do the skill. C, regression. Regression is not a technical term. We use it all the time in practice. On the exam, maintenance is going to be, a lack of maintenance is going to be the better response. And then differentiation, response differentiation, where we don't have any specified responses. We're not differentiating between responses. There simply is a maintenance issue, right? They learned it. They stopped learning it. They can't do it. The issue is most likely related to maintenance. It is not uncommon for supervision sessions to look drastically different from regular sessions, even though the only thing that has changed is the presence of a supervisor. What is potentially occurring? Now, a very common thing to happen in ABA is if you have a supervisor come out every 2 weeks or so, that behavior tends to change. And a lot of times, simply the presence of a supervisor is enough to change not only your behavior, but also the client's. So when your sessions look drastically different from regular sessions, just due to the presence of a supervisor, what is potentially happening? A, your treatment is ineffective. Well, if the only change is the presence of a supervisor, your treatment hasn't changed. So the treatment being ineffective doesn't really fit if we're talking relative to the presence of a supervisor. B, reactivity is taking place. This is most likely what's occurring. And reactivity is behavior change in the presence of a new person, right? And so when your supervisor shows up, everybody's behavior changes. They're reacting to the presence. C, the client gets more nervous around the supervisor. Well, we're never going to use this mentalism, right? Nervous as the cause. And then D, the supervisor intentionally sabotages session. That is highly, highly unlikely. Maybe treatment's ineffective, but when we're talking about just the presence of a supervisor affecting session that drastically, the better answer is probably reactivity is taking place. If you're going to use a punishment procedure to reduce a target behavior, what should you do as well? All right, finishing up with a question. It's very important. It's a very fundamental idea, right? And so if we're going to use punishment procedure and we're reducing a target behavior, what is occurring? Well, we're taking a behavior away that serves a purpose. Behavior serves a purpose, right? It gets something, it gets rid of something, it has a function. When you take that behavior away, you've taken away a functional way for the client to interact with the environment. So what do you need to do? A, teach a replacement behavior. Sure, right? You definitely want to teach a replacement behavior, okay? And that's called the fair pair rule. Now, the fair pair rule says if we reduce something, we've got to give something in its place. So A is absolutely what we need to do. However, we want to pick the best answer. So we never only read one answer choice, we read them all. If we look at B, teach a functionally equivalent replacement behavior, that's a much better answer than A. Our replacement behavior should be functionally equivalent. Remember, we're removing a behavior that serves a purpose. We need to give another behavior in its place, meeting the same purpose or serving the same function. C, teach functional communication. Maybe, maybe not. It really is dependent. Anytime you reduce the target behavior, you've got to increase another functionally equivalent behavior. All right, excellent. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com. Make sure you subscribe, join, like. Let us know when you pass. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.